I'll be making a Why You Wouldn't Survive of this movie. I don't hate this movie, I just like pointing out tiny stuff for the fun of it and not being serious, and cinema sins is a thing. But I primarily focus on zombie stuff, sometimes not if I feel like it. I'm also writing this all down as I go, as I watch it for the first time, instead of a second or third rewatch to get more genuine reactions so my writing isn't diluted on what happens later in the film. So keep all that in mind, subscribe while you're at it, and let's do this, gamers! Apparently, waking up at 10 a.m. might be considered late for some people, but true late-night gamers and people with graveyard shift sleeping schedules like me consider 10 a.m. rookie numbers for waking up late. South Korea is probably the only country that still plays PUBG. We start the movie pretty much immediately getting into the onset of the zombie outbreak. I am all for that. However, I do find it funny that only when Oh Yu is told about supposedly fake riots by his party chat friends that he checks his TV for it to be on the emergency signal, his phone just now starts giving out an emergency alert at that very second, and zombies start audibly attacking civilians right outside his door, conveniently, all when his party chat says to go check. The city streets suddenly become loud in the midst of chaos, with cars crashing, car alarms, and sirens sounding off, and many people screaming in terror. While it puts you in the veil of an out-of-nowhere pandemic, it feels way too sudden for him when he had all that peace and quiet after he woke up. Maybe it just happened down the street or within the district and just got to his neck of the woods, but I feel like street attacks would be noticeably audible before TV stations would be off the air and emergency alerts would be going out. Before news stations started taking complete control, and emergency alerts would be going out on phones. Maybe they waited that long to prevent panic? I don't know. I'm not that knowledgeable on South Korean public emergency policy. I do love how they introduce the panic and chaos though. People scrambling on where to go, the car struggling not to run over anyone as it tries to escape, while the fire truck ramming into the apartment building and causing an explosion felt a bit too Dawn of the Dead 2004 for me. I appreciate the effort put into showing what it actually looks like during the initial outbreak. -1 sin. Okay, this was genuinely awesome and disturbing all at once. So for a good zombie film where we are not completely familiar with how the zombie virus works yet, it's crucially important to have your first infected have some depth, whether it be shocking, terrifying, or give a good example of what's to come. And this scene of the young student embracing her mom in a nonchalant tone amidst the chaos, and then suddenly turning and snapping her neck Train to Busan style before biting her, was somewhat predictable, but still equally engaging, and a good first look at the zombies we will be experiencing. -2 sins. So, after bearing witness to everything you just saw outside from your balcony and hearing screaming at your front door, you decide, hey, let's open up the door. What could possibly go wrong? In that split second of the door being cracked open, his neighbor barges into his apartment trying to get away from his brother, who has probably turned. Junyu doesn't hesitate to try and force his neighbor out, which, good for him, this is his place. But before kicking him out, he allows the blood-soaked collared neighbor to use his bathroom before leaving? What could possibly go wrong by giving him time in there? We get a brief rundown of this widespread infection from a conveniently running and still on-air news broadcast. Although I'm surprised the hardcore PC gamer is using basic cable news to get this info, and not some website he turns on or his own phone. I don't know too many hardcore gamers that use cable TV to get their information anymore. The infection is described as starting with screaming and bleeding of the eyes, to acts of violence and of course cannibalism, but conveniently cuts off when talking about the infection spreading through bites and stab wounds by the infected, right as the neighbor walks in out of the bathroom with, of course, a covered bite wound. That's some good timing. Oh ho! I already like our protagonist. He doesn't sit there and stare at this possible infected or stupidly hesitate. No, he grabs that kitchen knife when he knows the information and prepares himself. -1 Oh, never mind. He sees that the eyes are bleeding profusely like the news broadcast stated, and the neighbor starts snapping his body all over, and of course he hesitates to kill him. While I get the shock of seeing this unnatural sight and stalling to kill another human being on the spot would have most quaking in their boots. It's do or die, man. You already know one bite or maybe even scratch is death at this point. Get in there! It's the beginning of the zombie movie. So the first zombie conveniently doesn't get a good bite or scratch on the main character's first direct fight cliche. Luckily, the door wasn't completely shut, so he can just push his infected neighbor outside and slice up his arm a bit to shut him out. Luckily, there wasn't any other infected, like say the neighbor's brother, that could have barged in during that period of time. Okay, no lie, this actually caught me off guard. I was fully expecting the neighbor and another infected to start coming in, slamming at the door to get in. But no, another infected shows up and suplexes the neighbor and I guess kills him? The infected can and will kill each other. An interesting dynamic I haven't really seen outside a few random common infected in Left 4 Dead, minus one sin. Alright, that was all just the intro for the movie, and we get this really cool music montage of the city and future days passing by, and sporadic shots of infected bodies inside and out. Really cool, minus another sin. Barricading the door with your fridge. Good thinking, but honestly, you don't know how long you're going to be stuck in there, so I'd be getting as much water and food in containers as possible before it gets shut off. I really do like the fact that this movie unintentionally kind of captures how a majority of people had felt in the early days of the coronavirus lockdowns, despite filming for the movie lasting from October to December of 2019, a couple months before any of that even started, with the media saying to be prepared to have rations for long periods of time and being stuck in your home not knowing how long this will all last, texting loved ones that you can't see each other till it's all over. The movie retrospectively hits hard for these trying times. I'm gonna go ahead and take off 3 sins. Getting into day 2, with the electricity still running, I wouldn't have my phone off the charger for even a second in case the electricity does go out, especially since cellular services have been off and on so frequently so early on. We get footage of a guy on social media leaning out of a multi-story window to try and get reception to talk to his friends and leans far enough where he falls to his death. Like, I get it, you want to talk to people, but you gotta do this little baby Mario jump to stretch an inch further? He really just died over an extra inch?
Yeah, boy.
He starts using a drone to see what other floors and apartments are like by plugging his phone into it. While good to do for reconnaissance, he risks potentially the only line of communication he may have if the drone dies. He misflies it, it disconnects, or runs out of power. While a part of me is saying, dude, why are you playing games when something could potentially push through your front door or climb up your balcony at any moment? I mean, but I can't judge too hard because I would probably be doing the same playing video games till the electricity ran out. But come on, PUBG of all games? That's gonna be the last game you play? Junyu awakens to car alarms going off outside. He goes to see what is causing the noise, and a bullet whizzes by his head. Yet we see this officer who fired it 4 stories below. How and why did she get this angle? She was sprinting through the streets, making tons of noise, and all these infected nearby just stare at her long enough so she can figure out she is out of ammo and panic for more rounds, so we have this suspense. Wouldn't those gunshots have attracted their immediate attention instead of them just staring at her at first? For once, someone desperately scrounging to load ammo into their gun at the last second gets actually overwhelmed. But she at least gets to shoot one more infected before getting pinned down. Okay, this scene genuinely creeped me out, threw me for a loop, but also raised more questions. The officer attempts to kill herself before turning, but the infected that have her pinned fling her armed hand away to disarm her and drag her into a subway that has more infected waiting? Whoa! They know to disarm people and to also drag them into infected hordes. They have this kind of like herd mentality. That's pretty creepy, dude. Minus one sin for a new zombie mechanic I never thought of and hope they utilize later on. However, the fact that this horde of infected paid little to no mind to the loud ass gunshots and Junyu screaming has me questioning everything I know about zombies. Junyu tries to white knight his way into the lady cop's heart by screaming out loud, but she gets dragged away anyways, and he just advertised his whereabouts to the infected nearby and in the building. It's a simple way to expose yourself. The brutish infected from earlier that attacked his infected neighbor starts forcing his way into the apartment, and Junyu doesn't have a plan ready for anything that may have broken down the door prior. He just reaches for a golf club that was nearby. Shouldn't you have been more prepared after a day? I would have had a lot more stuff laying around to attack the infected. How did this infected bust through the locked door and just casually sit behind the fridge so fast? Instead of whacking the zombie with the golf club while it was slowed down by the fridge, he risks hanging off the balcony's edge to bait it into falling to its death. While it was a high-risk, high-reward situation, this gamble was a bit much, as the floor below you could have infected that could bite at your feet. You yourself could have fallen to your death, and he didn't know for sure if the infected would blindly fall off like this, considering he has only had one encounter up to that point. It was all a bit too dramatic, but hey, I'm sure Ellis or Coach will come by to rescue him from the ledge. Oh, and plus 3 cents for each reason. Probably wasn't the best idea in the world to keep all your food in a place where it could easily be toppled over if something came barking at your door. But it is still gripping how his rationed food is now pretty much wasted after trying to save someone's life. Even during zombie apocalypses, Twitch streamers and YouTubers will still tell you to smash that like button and subscribe. A news broadcast is still running and electricity is still going into day 7 as we get information that the infected have heavily reduced sight, vision, and smell. Well, shit. Gonna have to take away those 2 sound-related sins from earlier and say, wow, they actually have a valid reason for zombies ignoring sounds and taking their time when staring at a survivor. I just hope they stay consistent with that idea. I'm gonna go ahead and take off 1 sin for now. So the infected have 3 out of 5 senses being bad and mimic their past lives like Romero's zombies. I kind of wish we got to experience these zombies' behaviors at first instead of being told and spoon-fed the information. While I may have gotten the hearing thing wrong, I would have loved to seen for myself, or Ju knew for himself, that the infected mimic their past lives by doing something related to their old job. While it's hard to believe commercials would be playing during a dangerous murdering pandemic, it's not too far from the truth, but at the same time, having a guy basically ASMR mukbang as a ramen commercial seems like it was just there to drive the main character to waste his last food. Being fed up with the news, he accidentally knocks over his last bottle of water and realizes the water has finally shut off. You're 7 days in and have had plenty of containers to have stockpiled plenty of tap water. You could even use plastic bottles that's reusable. You could even use the bottles of alcohol in the cabinet. You could have emptied them out and poured some tap water in there. In the long run, you're gonna need water a hell of a lot more than alcohol. Let's not think about the long term because movies really don't consider that.
TV에서 맨날 똑같은 화면만 나와요. 집 안에서 기다리고 있으라는데 뭐가 어떻게 되고 있는 건지.
Okay, damn. This is hitting home. Did they predict the future? 10 days in, and it dawns on him that they developed an app that can work on FM radio frequencies just by using a 3.5mm jack-capable device to use as an antenna.
아씨, 뭐다 무선이야, 씨.
Oh, this is the opposite of a Raycon sponsorship read. Lol. So from day 10 to day 15, Junyu has survived on a pure liquid diet of only liquor, with his only side effect being hallucinations. From what I've read, humans can only last about 3 days without water, and in rare cases, 5 to 8 days. But would it be physically possible to live that long, since hard alcohol tends to dehydrate you faster, being a diuretic? I guess he may have had a bit more food and water that they don't really ever show or explain, but the fact still remains that alcohol would dehydrate him faster, and I feel like his symptoms would be a bit more severe in mental and physical degradation besides just hallucinating. Being drunk, dehydrated, and distraught, Junyu pulls the same stunt as the dead guy from earlier and leans out from his balcony to get a signal, only to hear his family die over a voice message. I'm surprised in his mental and physical state that he was able to hold on so tight without losing his grip or footing. Junyu starts yelling out loud to get the attention of other infected on the floor, but none come his way, unlike that fridge-pushing zombie from earlier that went after him because of his screaming, even though he does stumble on his infected, now paralyzed neighbor around the corner, who is not paying attention to his yelling. The blood on the walls stay particularly bright red, despite blood usually turning more brownish red after drying over time. I personally know that because I've used my own blood in painting before. Please don't judge me, I'm not insane. The crippled, infected neighbor quickly crawls to Junyu, only to stop a few feet away to stare at him so June can yell at him some more. To add to the intensity, randomly, a bitten woman, who may be an image of his mother, it's him hallucinating. I compared the images of the two, and they were different looking, but I may be wrong, that might be his mom that he's seeing, comes screaming in his far-off direction, which must have been the first time some alive people have shown up in a 2-week span, only to turn right in front of him conveniently at the only time he leaves his apartment in 15 days. Despite having awful vision, 2 separate hordes instantly spot Junyu, but again, conveniently can't hear him after his multiple outbursts, even though a bulking zombie from earlier heard him from behind a closed door. I'm having a hard time understanding their level of sight and vision, but like I usually say with these, we may chalk that up to a case-by-case basis per infected. He goes to use the still working elevator, only for more infected to be in there and conveniently collide with the oncoming horde so he can narrowly escape. This scrawny gamer can hold back 4 or 5 zombies from pushing the door open, but a fridge couldn't hold 1 infected back? Junyu spectates numerous explosions in the city across the waterway, and the bridge seems to have casual traffic going by. You would think 20 days into an outbreak like this would have this bridge closed off, less people on the road, or more abandoned vehicles to slow them down, but no, we just have some casual cars driving on by like there's nothing going on. The electricity finally goes out on day 20 due to these explosions, but as to what caused these explosions is up for debate. Besides military bombing, you could also argue, since the power goes out, that there were power plants, specifically nuclear, that hit critical mass after being unmanned, since nuclear power makes up about 25% of South Korea's energy, although they would have blown up a week and a half prior at around the 7-day mark and been much more catastrophic in their blasts. But there's also thermal-based plants that could have had gas leaks that led to these explosions, but multiple explosions across the city all at once is really hard to believe. So as to what causes these explosions, it just seems to be there to give more desperation to Junyu's situation. The lights going out and plunging into darkness is the final push for Junyu as he records his final words of just
안녕.
nothing else, being basically speechless as he starts to hang himself, only for a random laser pointer to come out of nowhere and say no. Good timing. This girl's been there for a bit, considering her little camping spot and hanging chair setup, and has probably noticed this guy with her binoculars before. But the woman waits till he is already hanging himself before attempting to make any contact? While I applaud the use of the laser pointer pointing out words to communicate with them, why did she wait for him to do this? Is she into strangers choking themselves? Or does she only work with suicidal people? I ain't gonna lie, she cute as fuck. But she comes out of nowhere, because the guy that lost everything in life always gets some kind of pretty and tough girl in a zombie-like outbreak and in real life. Isn't that right, guys? Gotta commend this girl for setting up a rig like this that will trap any infected that come through the front door. -1 sin, that is some ingenuity. Day 21, and we get some rain. But I still don't know how he has been staving off dehydration up until this point. That, and he just now starts going, oh, I'm hungry. How about that? I didn't know I could get hungry. How have you been eating up until this point? I thought you were out of food. Kim Yoo-bin throws a softball trying to get a wire to Junyu. He sees this, sets up a drone to bring a wire over to have a direct line between them so they can give each other items, food, and supplies. An infected on the ground level sees the softball with the wire attached still on the ground and pulls it as hard as possible for the attached chair to fling at the girl and knock her unconscious. You would think the survival savvy woman would have reeled the softball back in, but nah, we need some dramatic tension. I'm conflicted on this one. For one, the infected can barely see and hear, but they can put together that this small baseball with a wire attached that's been sitting there for a while, probably like 20-30 minutes, obviously means to that zombie that it leads to a living, breathing survivor and pulls it as hard as possible. On the other hand, this zombie here is a firefighter. And as previously stated, infected will retain the motor skills similar to their careers and pastimes. And who better else to know how to climb a flimsy wire than a firefighter? So plus and -1 sin for this interestingly dumb scene. The firefighter infected knows she is up there and knows exactly what floor she is on, despite them apparently having reduced vision. Do firefighters naturally have better eyesight on top of higher dexterity? Junyu fires up the low battery drone to attempt to save her, and we get a drone versus zombie fight. And apparently, the noise of this attracts a horde to his front door on the 4th floor? Why? He screamed earlier and nothing came, but the slight buzzing of a drone attracted them? The zombie pulls a Karate Kid, reacts just in time to catch the drone perfectly in midair and crush the drone as if this zombie is a Disney villain, screaming over his victory over the remote-controlled drone while staring at Junyu. What? This is a little too silly. Yubin regains consciousness just before the firefighter is able to climb in and cuts his hand off. Gotta hand it to her. She has movie-perfect timing.
어떻게 이걸...
Dude, how did you survive on alcohol up until this point? Why are you complaining? Junyu now decides that foraging for food and water in other apartments is a good idea after he is delivered food. You didn't think of doing so before when you were alone and before you lost all hope? Why now? Why didn't you look for supplies when you had nothing else? You gotta wonder why during stealth scenes, infected will be alone, even though these infected tend to prefer to group up. Junyu spends a few minutes getting supplies from his neighbor's apartment, like peanut butter, Nutella, walkie-talkies, and a 3.5mm pair of headphones rather quietly. He is about to leave when he's like, you see that dead body under the covers? I really should pull the covers up and see if it's actually dead or not. What could possibly go wrong? The neighbor's infected brother has apparently stayed in this apartment over 2 weeks the whole time, despite them knowing how to open doors and have been shown to bust them down when they start hearing sounds. Not only that, but as usual, this infected makes no grunting or growling sounds like all the other infected from before, so it can do a Zombieland ninja attack on Junyu, so it can jump scare. He is able to escape back to his apartment without drawing any more attention and wolfs down his jar of peanut butter and a bottle of beer quickly. How has he survived this long with how fast he goes through rations? The two share noodles and use some water to boil them and have a date-like experience over their walkie-talkies, talking about how to cook noodles. While it's a much-needed reprise to normality for them, I'm really surprised the survivalist girl isn't just gonna eat the noodles raw to save water, and also to eat again so soon after eating the Nutella she was gifted, considering she was so adamant about eating more than a small portion per day and was rationing her water to small sips a day. For no discernible reason, the zombie horde outside starts going up the buildings together while Junyu and Yubin are casually talking 4 stories high. While a small chunk of the horde is going by Yubin's apartment, she coincidentally knocks over 2 shelves while reaching for her mini axe. Because we need tension, but there was no reason for the horde to be going up there. There was no sound to attract them. To save his new girlfriend in the nick of time, he calls the apartment down the hall from Yubin, so the horde goes into that room where the phone is ringing instead. How did he pull this off? There's no power. How are the phones able to pick up and ring? Unless there's emergency power, but that would have gone out by now too. They both decide to meet up and get to the 8th floor together because apparently it's barren and there's no infected. So she grapples down like she's a firefighter down a rope, and these infected just kinda stare her down long enough for her to get her bearings and unhook the rope and all that. Yet these infected over here fling themselves at her full speed while she is running. So the infected are being pretty inconsistent on how they approach survivors. All these infected have been shown to pile on top of each other pursuing survivors before, but in this case, they stand back and only go in one by one after her in an orderly fashion. After being tackled and jumped at, she falls to the ground for a few seconds, and no infected are close close to her or are rushing to her like before. I'm glad they give her this time to really get a breather in before attacking again. I'm surprised to see that revolver the female officer dropped 2 weeks ago is still there on the ground in good condition. You would think the infected police officers from earlier would have seen the revolver on the ground, picked it up, and walked off with it trying to imitate using it, considering they retain memories of their past careers. I mean, a firefighter was able to scale a building on a wire. You'd think an infected would learn to pick up a pistol that they used in the past. When she finally grabs the gun, an infected finally is able to hastily jump her and pin her down, surprise attacking from the metro entrance. Why was it waiting till now to attack? And why are the infected so inconsistent in their hostile behavior? And also, why, while she is pinned down, do other infected not bite or do anything to her? Junyu, after spectating from his own balcony, Yubin get halfway across the street, suddenly saves her from being pinned down. How did he get down 4 stories with infected still in the building so quickly? I doubt he had the finesse to rappel down to ground level in the same way Yubin did so quickly. The infected horde now decides to start hoarding up and going fast now that these two are together and running away to safety. The two get inside the apartment by shutting the still intact glass doors. They call for the still working elevator. There are no infected in the elevator this time, and the elevator doors shut right in the nick of time as the glass doors break. When arriving on the 8th floor, they find it spotless, no blood or guts anywhere. I find that hard to believe when right at that moment, a horde of infected shows up on that exact floor as if the infected knew the exact floor number these two were going. They just arrived there quietly. How the hell did these infected know? Despite having horrible vision and trouble seeing survivors before, this group of infected instantly spot them and give chase. While this horde is cornering them before they have no other options, the last door Yubin checks and is begging to be opened suddenly opens, with the survivor popping out with a smoke screen of all things, and is able to get them inside without any infected interference. And this is just in time. This apartment is looking nice with plenty of supplies. The unknown survivor offers them food and water, talking about an incoming rescue team he heard over the radio or the internet or something, until Junyu passes out from the drugged water and Yubin somehow retains consciousness, only to be zip-tied and dragged into a room where the unknown survivor's infected wife is also restrained. But how did he get his zombified wife leashed up like this so perfectly when the infection time is just a few minutes? And he set this up so his wife could eat a survivor that may come by, all while having still so much food, water, and even cigarettes to spare? How did this guy have this all set up? So this is possibly the first time he has fed someone to his dead wife, although he may have fed their child to her, I don't know. He acts and works this system like he has done it repeatedly and fed many survivors to her. Somehow this little belt being held back just a little bit has prevented the infected mom from fully biting Yubin, even though she is already on top of her. Yeah, okay, whatever's gonna cause Junyu to panic so he can drop his gun. During this skirmish, the room suddenly goes quiet during the girl-on-girl action, so the unknown survivor slowly opens the door to see why it suddenly got quiet, only for Yubin to come at him with his infected wife with a pillowcase on her head. But how would a pillowcase covering her sight make her completely silent in that short period of time? Zombie movies tend to forget that their own zombies, while they're roaming about or trying to attack someone, tend to make a noise similar to but whatever. Okay, after having experienced that loud enough noises can, or sometimes can't, attract infected, you would think that they would have found any blunt or sharp object nearby and just bash the married couple's brains in while the wife is dining on her husband. But nah, let's use 2 valuable rounds in this revolver and make the most possible noise instead and attract a horde while we're having this mental breakdown. Infected start flooding into the building, and a lot of them know the exact floor to go to. But would a gunshot for reduced hearing infected be that easy to pinpoint the location of? Okay, we're gonna start hitting hard emotionally again. Yubin, after everything, has given up and wants to end it all, much like Junyu did when they met. And Junyu agrees and almost pulls the trigger on her before a helicopter is heard. Oof. Thank God. I thought we were about to pull The Mist 2007 ending with this. They start rushing to the roof and now start fighting infected one by one. Thank God the maniac they ran into before all of this was so well stocked in zombie repelling tools and weapons, despite keeping a zombie in his own bedroom the whole time. I don't understand this guy's setup and why he was so well supplied. Yu-Bin somehow doesn't get bitten in this situation. Junyu somehow keeps a horde back by only holding up a bike. You gotta wonder how these infected don't try and just bite the fingers, since they were so prone to just wanting to infect people earlier in the film. Don't you just hate it when you can't drain the hose on these hoes? We get quick shots of the 4 set pieces of this film, and it made me think, wow, they really did a lot with just a few areas. I'm gonna take off a sin for that. They get cornered on the rooftop as the door busts open, and Junyu fires the revolver 4 times after 2 rounds had been used earlier on the couple, and he runs out of ammo. I'm gonna -1 sin for a zombie movie actually keeping track of the number of rounds in a gun instead of pretending it has infinite ammo. Right as we get to thinking they're going to be ripped apart by the horde, suddenly the helicopter from earlier the helicopter that they heard from earlier rises from the side of the building silently until it's a few feet away, and then it starts making sound. And starts mowing the horde down with armed troops. How the hell was this helicopter not heard at all? And why did it rise from the side of the building so closely instead of descending on it from above? +3 sins for this Deus Ex Machina moment that tried to be cool but raised the most questions I've had yet throughout this whole movie. Where the hell did it come from? Why was it not making sounds? And the timing was just too perfect. And again, don't take me too seriously, I just thought it was funny. I know there's going to be somebody in the comments complaining at me saying I'm taking this too seriously. It's just a video, dude. Chill out. They start flying away to safety, and Junyu's phone starts getting reception again with tons of notifications. But I'm still surprised his phone has any power left. The movie closes out saying rescue efforts were made by tracking SOS messages on social media, and they will start campaigns to inform people to post their locations on social media. What? How? This is nearly a month into the outbreak. How can people do this if their electricity and internet are out? Junyu's social media SOS was weeks ago, and for all the military knew, he was dead. And if he's not dead, he would have no way of knowing to be on the roof at that exact moment for the helicopters to arrive. And if he did hear the helicopters, you would be forcing him to go through hundreds of infected to get killed just to try to get to safety. There's just too much wrong with this moment. We see Junyu's social media SOS post having reached 1,200 likes. He apparently was a moderately popular game streamer, and I find it hard to believe he would only have 1,200 likes when it comes to a national crisis like this after 25 days. Crises like these would generate a lot more likes. I'm just saying. It fades to his hashtag of I must survive, being edited to hashtag alive.
He said it! He said it!
So I guess the message here was social media can be used to save lives, but also don't give up while you're in quarantine. I think the message of this movie shifted because of all the stuff that has happened through the coronavirus lockdown. But it's hard to say. It was still a good movie. Now, let's go ahead and finish this up because I have a why you wouldn't survive of this movie to get working on. So let's tally up the sins and see some outtakes.
Wow.
I have to tweet about this. Cancel.
김유빈.
You've been thunderstruck! Like I do.
You got this, Travis. Make him wait for it. Boom.
Hi, I'm Johnny Knoxville. Welcome to Jackass. it! Come back! We're still here!
Come back! Oh, he ain't coming back.
Hey, what happened to your bike?
What happened to my bike? You happened to my bike, you little loser! This is what's left after you stole it to save your Pokemon!
Who is this? Captain Mario reported. 1, 2, 1, 1, 1.
다 들리는데.
I'm on open mic again. Fuck.